Hello, listeners, and welcome to the third and final part of this mini-series on Harold Camping and family radio. In part one, Rachel talked us through her childhood along with her family's dedication to family radio. In part two, Rachel talked about how these teachings impacted her into adulthood, with this final segment focusing on Rachel's life after camping and healing through anxiety rapture. For early access to full-length ad-free episodes, please visit patreon.com/The Cult Vault to support the show from as little as £1 a month. And now, here is Rachel. I think if I hadn't had that adult experience and I thought the end of the world was coming, I would be like, let's just get married because I'd like to know what it's all about before
I
it's
die.
all over.
Yeah. People would ask camping. Younger people would, call into open forum and say, like, I'm, 17 years. There was one guy who was 17. There was another woman who was like 28. And they both basically asked the same question in a span of a couple months. And they were like, we're young and we're sad we're going to miss out on something. And how do I handle that sadness? You're asking a guy in his late 80s how to handle the sadness of a young person who thinks their life is about to end and God's coming back. And he's like, well, if you're saved, you'll go to heaven. It'll be the most wonderful thing. It won't even compare to, whatever great thing you think is going to happen on earth. And he's like, and you also have to respect that it's God's choice to come back when he said he's going to come back, and he can't do it on your timeline and all of this. And I'm like, at the end of the day, you're an old guy who got to live your life telling young people your lives are going to end soon and you should be grateful. That's essentially what you're saying.
So you and your husband are married. It's coming towards that date that Harold Camping has given for the end of the world. Just talk the listeners through what day-to-day life looked like and how things really became more extreme as it got closer to that date. And then everything that happened after that date, because that was over a decade ago now, and we're both sitting here today having this discussion.
Yeah. So we got married like about 3 years before 2011. All that was supposed to happen. And so the first year or two, it was okay. We were finding our rhythm. I had a part-time job. I also was diagnosed with a chronic illness, and but then there were so I had to take some medication for that. But then there are other things like we stopped going to the dentist. World's gonna end. Our teeth aren't gonna rot out that fast, right? Like, so you start scaling back on some of the maintenance things you have to do. We had we would go on a family vacation every summer, and I remember in 2010 it's like, this is the last summer, because if the rapture is going to happen next May in 2011, we're not going to have another summer, right? So we kind of had a big to do with the summer of 2010, like spending a lot of time with people. We would pay our bills, but we weren't worried about saving. So like at a certain point, money wasn't going into the 401k like it would have. And money was, for us, we thought this is a test of, how much we believe in some ways, like what we're willing to give up. I had always wanted a horse, but I didn't pursue that. I figured that wasn't going to happen for me. I almost said it wasn't in the cards, but that wasn't a phrase we would have used, because we were very against, like, card games were kind of okay, but games with dice were like not really liked, because God would decide how the dice would land, kind of thing. So we were very careful with our phrases. You didn't say, oh my goodness. You certainly didn't say, oh my God. You didn't curse. You didn't, none of that. You followed the speed limits. You followed all the laws, because that, God wants us to follow the laws of our country, right? So we have to do that. God has put the government in place, and so we have to respect that. Although they were very like apolitical. Like they didn't talk politics, but definitely don't get an abortion, and definitely like so follow the law, except like also be strict about things where the law
God
isn't
wants
strict
you to
enough.
follow. God wants you to follow the laws around driving your car because
Because he has decided who is in charge and they made that law, so it's God's will. They didn't actually say, oh, but like calculating it is like you can go faster on these roads because physics. They're like, but no, this is what the sign says, we must follow it. So like even that nitty gritty thing was important. Like, and we even equated that to sinning. Like if you go 1 mile an hour over the speed limit and you're pulled over and given a ticket, you have committed a crime. So if you sin once, and the Bible says this, if you sin in the book of James, if you sin once, you're guilty of all. So just one sin is enough to send you to hell. So I mean, everything was related in some way. Yeah, it was, yeah, and of course these things would come up as often as people would ask them on open forum, and Camping would say what he thought, and then it suddenly became part of our vernacular. None of that is surprising in retrospect, but like it just felt like there were more and more rules being piled on, and it felt like you couldn't even breathe. So 2010 was a lot of like last of. I do remember in April 2011, I went to see my I went to like the last kind of music show thing I would ever see, that I thought I would ever see. And I tried to enjoy myself, but I was really sad the whole time because I felt like this is the last. And I took a trip in April to see my extended family, many of whom did not agree. And so for them, it was not a last goodbye, but for me, it was a last goodbye that I thought I was good. It ended up not being. Yeah, the month of May, so leading up to May 21st, was absolutely awful for me. My husband took a week off of work leading up to the date. And he did tell two people at work who were like, see you when you get back, but we respect that you think this, we just disagree. And we spent that month, we had a dog, making sure there was enough dog food. I remember breathing a sigh of relief because I had been terrified I might get pregnant and then have a due date sometime between May 21st and October 21st, 2011, because I was scared what's that going to look like. And am I even going to bother getting prenatal care? Because if God is doing the rapture on May 21st, like, you know, what's my duty here? So I actually felt relief that I hadn't gotten pregnant. But that was like the only relief I felt. It was day in and day out was just like me barely functioning. I felt like I was in a blur. I had family radio on all the time. I was trying to read the Bible as much as possible. There was a lot of crying happening because I was so overwhelmed. And I felt so certain that God wasn't coming back for me. And at the same time, like some people might think, then why are you there? First of all, I didn't know where else to go. And now I'm married to somebody who believes this too. Right. So like leaving at that point would have felt like an awful betrayal. But also I felt like if this is where the truth is, then by not following, I'm definitely not saved. At least if I'm listening to the Bible, I have a hope of salvation until the moment on May 21st, 2011, when God comes back. There's still some hope for me now. So days would pass and I would just pray that I would become saved, that God would be merciful to me and my family. And it was just constantly reading the Bible and listening to family radio every moment. Like, I don't even remember us putting on the news. Like, there are things that happened in politics in this country, like the Affordable Care Act happened at some point in 2010. I wasn't aware. I didn't know. Like, and the funny thing is, as apolitical as family radio was, we were all like, yes, you must, vote, don't waste your vote, and you should be conservative because that's the closest to what God would want. So vote conservative. And I like blindly voted conservative. Like, There's a guy in the Senate right now. I helped vote him into office in his first term, and ever since then I've been trying to vote him out because whoops, like, but I did that because I felt like that's what God would want me to do because of what I had been taught. So there wasn't a whole lot of like there wasn't a lot of talking to people in the outside world. I didn't have a job involved with anybody else. I was I was working online, but it was like as helping people, like tutoring, but it's anonymous for safety reasons anyway. Nobody knew what was going on except like those people in my family and my husband's family. And basically everybody who was we were insulating ourselves even more. Like we're trying to pass out tracts, at least once a week, but we're still only talking to ourselves. Where everybody is getting hyped, but at the same time I'm terrified. And now come to find out years later, I wasn't the only one who was terrified. We were all just too scared to say what we were thinking. We were too scared to voice our doubts. But we had doubts. And the week before May 21st, my dad flew out with one of my siblings and surprised us and stayed for like 2 days as like an extra special, hey, you thought we weren't going to see each other again, but let's do that. And then my dad flew back and then flew out again with another sibling. And they like stayed on the couch and we had an air mattress in the living room. And they left like 3 days before. And I remember we didn't even bother putting the air mattress away because who cares? Like we got 3 days left, right? Going to the store.
Have any idea what it was going to look like when it happened?
So camping had said he thought it would start in New Zealand, since that's when a day start, like beginning of a day. And that it would kind of start as an earthquake that would just kind of follow the time, like the time zone as the earth turned. And so he didn't think it would be everywhere all at once. So we actually turned the news on to see what was happening over in, other countries. Because we were, we're kind of at the end of a day, right? Like we're the last ones to, hit a new year, hit a new day, that kind of thing, just based on how the time, how the international dateline is placed. But he's like, I'm not entirely sure, but we should, watch for that. So we did. We had the news on the whole day, and nothing happened. And it took probably 2 or 3 hours of nothing happening on the other side of the world. And I crashed. I fell asleep on that air mattress. We didn't really have food in the house. We had a few crackers. We had dog food. My dog was fed, but like, we didn't have a lot of food. We hadn't been eating very well because who cares? The world's ending. Like we just have to get enough nourishment to like stay alive, and I was just so tired. I slept I would sleep for maybe 30 minutes, wake up, see the news, nothing happened. I wouldn't even try to fall asleep. I would just like pass out in the chair. And I just went from like a chair to the air mattress in the front room to another chair to the TV. And I dozed like all day. And then I fell asleep probably close to 5 p.m. our time. And I was just out. I think my body the adrenaline had finally wore off, and my body was like, nothing is happening. You have to sleep. And so I slept deeply. And it was the first time I had slept in months where I didn't have any nightmares. And then my dad called and he's like, let's talk tomorrow. Because it's like, okay, well, this had happened over a weekend. Like my husband has to go back to work Monday. Like my dad's got to go back to work. Like everybody in my family has to go back Monday. And it was a Saturday where I had come and gone. The next day was Sunday. But I remember later seeing an article where like some pastor guy had said, okay, the world's not going to end on that Saturday. And all these people who have been following camping are going to come flying back to church. I don't know a single person who did, because we were so scared of church. And now we didn't know what was going on. But also, I was too tired. I wasn't going back to church. I still haven't gone back to church. Like, I don't really feel safe in church anyway, and I don't feel like that's for me. But I certainly wasn't going to go back the day after I thought my life was going to totally change and end. And so the next day, I don't even know how many hours I had slept May 21st. Like, that's totally not how I thought the day was going to go, but it was. I couldn't stay awake. And the next day was Sunday, and my husband and I went to a park, and we spoke to my dad on the phone, who was like, listen, we know it's in God's hands. And we're like, yeah, we just have to keep going. And maybe, obviously we got that part wrong, but we still think the world's going to end October 21st, 2011. So camping was like immediately on the horn. He had an open forum. Normally they didn't have open forum on a weekend. And I don't remember if it was the weekend or if they set it up for that Monday, and they invited the press. And camping just said, yeah, like, we got that part wrong, but, the world's still going to end October 21st. This could be a spiritual rapture. This could be something where, like, God has stopped saving, like we said he would stop saving May 21st. So there's no hope of salvation anymore. And yeah, we're still here, but the world is going to end October 21st. So we were still waiting for that. But
gosh, keeping you right on the edge of that like precipice for 5 months. Oh my
yeah,
goodness. Like, it could be any minute. It could be any minute. Oh gosh.
it was awful. It was so bad. How do you live? And we just started to just do what we had to do, because at that point it's like, well, we still got bills to pay. I have to, like, put food in the fridge, but we don't go shopping on Sunday. You don't spend money on Sunday, because that is requiring somebody to be there and working on the Lord's Day if you're going to go shopping or going out to eat or getting food or anything like that. So Sunday we ended up eating, we had like some crackers in the cupboard, and I think we maybe had a little bit of something in the fridge that was left over. And then on Monday I went to the store, and then I had to think long and hard about, like, what if this doesn't happen? It was the first time I really let myself think that. And
I
not long
wonder if
after,
the back of your mind had already started to have those thoughts without you consciously realizing, because you were able to finally fall into a deep sleep after nothing happened on that day.
yeah, probably. I think it was there. I wouldn't let myself believe it was there until after that date came and went. And it wasn't too long after, I think a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks, Harold Camping had a stroke. So he wasn't on open forum anymore. So these questions weren't getting answered. So we were left to do whatever we thought we needed to do. And for me, that was, well, I'm not listening to this, because nothing new is being brought out, right? Like, and I think in that time frame, I let myself spend about a month thinking about it. We still had Sunday, like, Bible study as a family, but it was basically like reading things we had already read and just praying that, like, God would tell us what to do, because we weren't sure, like move our hearts, change, like, just give us an indication, or, like, we didn't believe that God was going to show up in a dream or anything like that, because we felt like that was didn't follow the Bible. Like, the word of God was complete. So God would, like, some a door would open, or something would work out, and we would just, like, trust that that's the direction we should go. And it was July, and I said to my husband, if the world doesn't end, I want to go to grad school. And that was the first time I had said, if this doesn't happen, here is what I am doing. And he said, okay, you should do that. Because I said I always wanted my PhD, and I would be almost done it by now if I hadn't followed all of this. And I really want to get back into school, and I really want to like, start my career in a different direction. I mean, joke's kind of on me, because if you don't become a professor, which is really hard, then a PhD doesn't help you that much. In some ways it hinders you, but it got me out of the cult and into the world. And so my my sister had decided she was going to grad school that fall. Whether the world was ending or not, she was out. So I had decided I was going to wait until October to see like what was going to happen. And also, I had a longer break between my undergraduate degree and applying to grad school. So I waited, and then I do remember like my husband took the day off, October 21st off. I think he took maybe the day off before. And we weren't handing out tracts anymore because it's like, well, why would we tell people about this? Like if salvation's over, like how useful is it to say like, oh, by the way, God's not saving you? Like why would you do that? By the way, the offshoot of the cult has done that since then. I'm like, I don't understand why we're spending money doing this, but
The further you branch away, the more extreme I feel things become.
Yeah.
No matter what major religion you're funneling down into, so it kind of makes sense in that way. The rhetoric around the babies and around the prophecies and uh not very nice stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I started to I remember being scared on October 21st. Nothing was happening. We went for a drive. He could see how nervous I was. I was still terrified. And I was still convinced that like God didn't love me and I wasn't saved and now there was no hope of salvation and I was just scared about what was going to happen. And I remember we went for a drive and then we went back and it was about 2 p.m. and he's like, I don't think this is happening. And I said, I don't think it is either, but what if it is? What if this is a test? He's like, it could be, but nothing's happening. And we went back to the house and he put on something that some old DVDs I had of what's this? Derek Jacobi and Brother Cadfael from like the early '90s, and that was something I always loved. I watched it with my grandmother growing up, so I had that as positive association with it. So, and I was like, but what if this is a test? And watching something right now that and not reading the Bible is like this is the reason. And he literally like put the disc in and was like, it's okay. But I think for him it was a realization of like how much damage this had done to me. I think some of the difference too is my husband grew up in a family where he really felt loved, whether or not it like came down to like my dad's way of showing love was to read the Bible to us. And he wasn't very demonstrative. And I know that's because of how he was raised. And since then, like my dad has apologized and we have a better relationship, but I didn't, and my husband had 2 supportive parents. My mom is not really a supportive person. She's pretty manipulative. And so she would say, I love you when she wanted something. So I also think that part of my background played a big role in like how I digested the information that was given to me from Herald Camping. So yeah, then October 21st came and went. And also my birthday was a few days before that. And my husband, we tried to go out to a really nice dinner and I cried the whole time in the middle of a very fancy restaurant because I was terrified that I was going to die. And I think it actually ended up helping us become closer together because he could see how this had affected me and how this had just really eaten away at who I was. Like I was kind of a shell of a person who didn't know who she was and was just all I wanted to do was live, like the most basic human thing. I just would like to live. And I'll tell you, like October 22nd, I woke up and I was like, all right, I'm getting a book on like studying for the GRE. I'm going to look into the university I'm going to. I'm doing this.
You had a lot of energy to refocus on other things. Now that this massive thing is been and gone and it's occupied all of your time and all of your life, and it doesn't appear that it's going to happen, how do you redirect all of that focus? And it sounds like you knew exactly where you wanted to go from there in some way, whether you knew step by step or whether you just had an idea of it, seems to have helped you out of that mindset and into something new. It's kind of like out of the, what do they say, out of the fire and into the pan, out of
Or
the
out of the
pan and
frying
into the
pan and into the fire. Yeah,
that's the
except
one.
I was definitely like not in the fire anymore. I was definitely like, okay, I'm a very type A person anyway. So I am, um, and I'm also the kind of person who's like, if I see something, I'm going to go for it. And I felt like that had been suppressed for so long. Um, I, I didn't totally know who I was, but I had always been really good at school. And so I think going back to school was a great way for me to find my footing again. And I spent the year between, almost a year between the world not ending and starting grad school, just like studying and remembering what I had learned, like preparing for grad school. And I did have like a little bit of a side business, but it wasn't, taking up a ton of my time. And I really got to enjoy relationships again because I wasn't so sad that things were ending. Um, Soon after May 21st, I wrote letters to my family, to both sets of grandparents, to my aunts, to my cousins, and I like physical letters, and said, yes, this date has come and gone and we are all okay. Because my dad had been like very preachy to these people for years. And because he was concerned, he didn't want them to die. Like, if he believed this, like, none of this was malicious on his part. And he really wanted everybody to be okay. And but I think after that happened, he really felt like he had burned some bridges. And so I reached out, and he didn't ask me to, but I reached out and I said, we are all okay and we love you. And we are looking forward to what the future has to bring. And everybody responded to that really positively. And I will have to say, like, my family didn't talk about it a lot, like my extended family, my grandparents. I think for the most part, they were just happy that, we were all okay and we were coming out the other side of it, and we still loved them. And we were also, I'm also very grateful that we really didn't have a lot of family who shunned us. We didn't really have, or I mean, there are some parts of the family people we didn't talk to, but that's because of other things and them never,
Family stuff.
there's always,
Family stuff.
right, like there's always the person you send some Christmas cards to and you're never going to get a response because you're only going to see them at weddings and funerals. Like, that's not a culty thing, that's a life thing. But we were, I had lost some friendships, because when we left the church, and then I had some people who did not speak to me. I did have one person who texted me May 21st and just said, I love you and I'm glad you're still here. I had one person who thought I would commit suicide. And I'm like, no, that was never the end goal. Like, we were not going to kill ourselves. And I just really felt like not understood. The person who texted, I love you, at the time I was grateful for because I knew she was trying to reach out. But then the next time I saw her, she really got on her soapbox about how I had done all of this damage to all these people by preaching these lies. And I just really didn't know how to handle it. So I really distanced myself because, I mean, now I know how to say, like, what cult mind control does to people, what undue influence really does to people. It changes you. It makes you do things that you think, you would never do. And people want to believe that they could never fall for it. And I am just here to say to every single person on the planet, the right cult or the right MLM or the right whatever will come along and it could drag you in just as easily as Harold Camping got my dad's attention, as easily as I followed along with all of that. Everybody is susceptible to a certain degree. And the more you think it can't happen to you, probably the more susceptible you are, because then you're not looking for all of the signs that this is dangerous.
Yeah. No, none of us are safe. None of us are safe. We just have to practice our honing skills and and learning about coercive control and what signs and symptoms of cults and cult-like activity look like. But still, I think even the world's leading cult experts, they of course may have a better radar at detecting these things, but I don't think any of us are safe from the power of influence.
No. Well, and I mean, there are people who go cult hopping because they're still looking for truth, and um, it's a powerful tool that people wield to be in charge of other people. And it's very real. And I also think, well, so I would say the experience gave me more empathy. Like the moment I was dropped into grad school, I was sharing an office with somebody who was is on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. I finally was learning like words to describe myself, like on the asexual spectrum, things that you never really explored. There's no point to doing that when you're in the cult. You just
Well,
suppress.
with
Um,
conservative Christianity as well, there's not really an opportunity to explore whether you are a sexually active being in the first place because you're supposed to
yeah,
suppress all of that stuff. So I imagine that was an added layer for yourself in really not only finding the terminology to go along with thoughts and feelings in your own mind and body, but also like sexuality as a thing is not part of your life until after you're married anyway, which is
yeah,
already significant years into being alive. So I
yeah,
think that's another thing to consider as well. It's not just realizing an identity or realizing an orientation or attraction or whatever words people would like to use. It's realizing that those things exist in the first place. The spectrum, for example, that you're talking about, like who would have known in a conservative Christian environment that all these different things exist?
yeah, yeah, exactly. And you don't talk, and I know people in conservative Christian circles who have said this too, like you don't talk about it. It's very hush hush. You're not allowed to do anything. And then you're married and suddenly you're supposed to like know like what what makes you tick and how to have a healthy sexual relationship. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I met other people. I did not tell anybody about my background at all. Until like my last or second to last year of grad school. I was in grad school 7 years. I got a master's and a PhD in math. And grad school had a lot of challenges, in part because I realized like I was emotionally immature in a lot of ways because I had to grow up so fast. Like you're talking about death and dying at such a young age in these cults sometimes. And you grow up so fast in some ways, and then in other ways, because you don't know how to process your feelings and you're not taught that, you're really emotionally immature. And I started going to therapy. I started finding hobbies. I rediscovered my love of horses. And I started like letting myself do some things just because it would be fun to try it. And I really had to work through my fear of not getting it right the first time. Because of course, like there's one rapture, right? You got one shot, like you got one life, and then you better not screw it up. That was the life I had been living. And I really had to take a lot of time to like embrace what I was good at. I had to learn when to say I don't know, I'm not sure. um I was also a teaching assistant, so that was my title, but I taught a lot of classes on my own to help get me through grad school. And so I was teaching and I was thrown into that. I was working on research. I was giving presentations, doing totally other, so many other things. And went to conferences to present my research. And I remember going to San Diego for a conference, and there was a guy standing on a street corner wearing a "Does God Love You" t-shirt, trying to hand out tracts. And I was with one of my friends at the time, and I looked at him and I got teary-eyed, and I was like, and I just said, he is in my old cult. And I think I had mentioned once before that I was in a cult to this friend, but I was like, he's still in my old cult in some way. And he's like, well, do you want to talk to him? And I was like, well, we don't all know each other. But I felt for him because he was standing alone. And in 2011, there were a lot of people, there were a lot of RVs and cars, and there was an RV caravan going around the country in North America handing out tracts. And then the rapture didn't happen, and these people had given up their lives. There was one person I heard of who put his dog down, put his dog to sleep because he didn't want his dog to suffer through 5 months of torment. And then, of course, his dog didn't need to be put down. And people made these choices because of what Harold Camping said. And Harold Camping turned around and said at one point before he died, he's like, I have sinned. I have misinterpreted the Bible. He was apologizing for misinterpreting the Bible because that to him was the sin. Not people did things they would not have done otherwise because of what I said. So to me, his apology is kind of garbage because you can't sit there and be like, it's between you and God. I'm sorry I misinterpreted the Bible, but what you did is, that was between you and God. You don't get to separate yourself like that. I don't care. He is responsible. And all of the effort that they put into getting donations, getting money, helping people write their wills, all of that, I never saw one thing that said, hey, if you are stranded somewhere because you are passing out tracts and you do not have a home, contact us and we will help find somebody in your area who can help. None of that. There was no effort to help these people. My husband and I and our family were lucky in many ways because we actually didn't give up our homes. We didn't give up our jobs. But these people lost a lot. They lost just about everything they had. A lot of people poured their savings, tens of thousands of dollars, into putting up billboards with messages, into gas money to drive places, to hand out tracts, because at the end of the day, it's not because they're stupid. It's because they cared about getting the word out and they wanted people to become saved. They wanted them to hear the word of God. They believed this was helping. And they ended up losing just about everything. And a lot of them lost their families too. A lot of these people, I knew many of them, they were the only believer, their only follower in their family. And then when this didn't happen, were they able to go back to their families? I don't know if their families would take them in, or if they did, if they would get a lot of I told you so's. I don't know, because we were so busy trying to figure out how to pay the bills and function ourselves that we lost track of a lot of people. It was like everything came to a standstill, and thank God we didn't put our dog down. Yeah. I can't imagine the horror of waking up, one day later and realizing the grave mistake that was made. And all Harold Camping could do was apologize for misinterpreting the scripture, because that to him was the sin. And then if you didn't forgive him for that, then you were sinning. So, now that's on you. And he's done. He got to live his life, and he died of old age. And no, he didn't make bukus of money off of this, but he did get to live his life on his terms. And so many people did not get to do that because of what he said and did. And I have to say now, though, my life is very different. I don't go to church, but I know people who did eventually go back to church. And I know some who don't. I know some people who still they follow Chris McCannany Bible Fellowship, which is really like, in some ways, I think might be more dangerous just because of how they don't believe there's any salvation anymore. They're very, I mean, he equated like taking your child to church to taking them to a drug den. He just is very extreme. He has said multiple times he doesn't believe in telling his children that God loves them because he doesn't know if God really loves them, because that's between them and God. I just can't imagine, but he thinks he's saved. Camping thought he was saved. Like, these guys have no problem being like, yeah, I'm good, but like, that's on you whether God really loves you. And that's God's choice, and nothing you can do to change that. Just like inundate yourself with the word of God and pray a lot. It's kind of wild how different my life is. I am very grateful that like most of the people I know have gotten out. The ones that I know that are still in, we just don't talk about it, because I know if I say something, it's going to upset them, and that's just going to push them away further. But I also know that they're the kind of people who have a hard time making decisions. And I think that's one reason they're still there, is there's somebody telling them what to believe. And I think that makes their life easier in some ways. But I also think that's really sad, because there's a lot in the big world and there's a lot you can do. I have a career now. I am making strides to like separate myself from that time like in my life that on my resume looks like I wasn't really doing much of anything, without like having to get into it, all the time. Like, that's a big personal thing that, I don't think needs to be like brought up to a future employer, but it is there's, my resume looks kind of, different. And that's okay. Like, I'm still employable. I still have a job. My husband and I moved to a different house a little more than a year ago, and it was really nice to get out of that house, because that house was really, well, first of all, we didn't maintain it like we should have because of the whole world going to end thing. And then it didn't really suit our needs anymore. And I just remember leaving for the last time and walking past the front room where I slept on the air mattress the day God was supposed to show up. And I just thought, like, good riddance. Somebody else can live here and make new memories. So that was really healing. And like, to pick a house that suited our personality and our needs, and not like, when my husband bought that house, he bought it because he thought he was going to be single and the world wasn't going to be around that long, and this was all that he needed. And it wasn't really, it wasn't like his dream house or anything, like, so picking something that we both liked was really nice to get to move and have like a fresh start. And also, like, when I graduated, when I got my PhD, it was within 3 days of May 21st, 2019. So like 8 years later, I'm, walking across the stage and I'm becoming a doctor and getting my doctorate. And that was really cool. I really felt like that was just like me walking away in another way. Like, it probably took me 4 years after 2011 to, I was still kind of following what was going on with the Bible Fellowship, and there were some new predictions, some new dates, and each date would like come and go, and each time I would get a little less worried. But it took me 4 years. There was like a 2015 prediction, and I was like, you know what? I can't keep doing this. I really can't keep doing this. I have to just keep going forward. And I stopped listening to it. Every once in a while, I'll like, see who's around and kind of, check in, not like say that I'm, but just like look on their Facebook page or their website a little bit. But
I think that's
really
great. You understand that it's important to be a line of communication to, as you said, the big world. if people decide to take a step back in the same way that you and your husband did. And you've mentioned that there are some people that might not have a chance at reconciliation with their families. There might not be people who have family members like yours who are kind of like, okay, well, it happened, so let's just move forward with it. We're all just happy to still be here and be together. You know, as you've said, not everybody will have that experience. In regards to the man with his dog, that is absolutely harrowing. And you mentioned, you know, if you did fall pregnant, you don't even know if you would have looked after yourself in a way that typically a pregnant woman might look after herself. Who knows what decisions people made behind closed doors because they thought it was going to be the end of the world, and then had to live with the fact that nothing changed.
Yeah.
And you said that, you know, people lost their lives, people lost their homes, people lost their animals, people lost all of their money, their jobs. But I imagine, you know, as we saw with the Millerite movement that we were talking about before we hit record button, people really did lose their lives. You mentioned that some people thought that you might be in a mind frame to complete suicide. There has to be some people that did go through with that decision, or at least heavily contemplate it if all of these things in their life had been given
Yeah.
away, their home, their livelihood, their family members, oh, it's
There's well, so there's one person I know of who passed away, and the circumstances around it are kind of hush hush, but like the impression I get is that it was through suicide after the fact. There was or at least that like there had been some suicidal ideation. There was somebody who called into open forum before May 21st and just said, I just want to end my life. I don't think that God has saved me, and I can't keep living with this, like, with this situation anymore. What do I do? And Harold Camping kind of laughed. I remember listening to this. He kind of laughed and he's like, well, if you kill yourself now, there's no hope. Like, there's still hope now. So you got to keep crying out to God and reading the Bible. And you have to keep doing this if you don't feel you're saved, and just hope that God will save you. And he was the last person that somebody should have called for help, because
yeah,
this woman needed real help. And the fact that, and I don't know what happened to her. I hope she's okay. But she was, you know, she was vocalizing something that I had felt too. I had some moments where I thought, is this even worth it? And then I also thought, well, yeah, there's still some hope. And honestly, like, some of what kept me going was having a dog, like having a pet, something else in my life that like could, you know, briefly give me some moments of joy when the rest of this just did not feel like it was livable anymore. And I think there, yeah, there are people who lost their lives in more ways than one, and it's just tragic. And you know, I will have to say, like, I did give you some contact information. If you want to include it, if anybody wants to email me, you can remain anonymous. It's an anonymous email too, like on my end. But I don't like. I'm happy to talk to people. I'm happy to talk to anybody. And like, to anybody out there who also followed Harold Camping and you didn't have anybody else at the end. So like I just feel so bad, and I don't know. I also feel like in some ways, you know, we let some of those people down because, you know, we didn't stay in contact. But I, like, on the other hand too, all of our lives were turned upside down in complete turmoil, and we were just trying to live day to day. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody. And but I also think like this experience has given me a lot of empathy. Like, there are times I had a friend I met through having my horse, and she's a great person, but she used to like laugh about Scientology and cults. And then there was one day I was like, well, I was in a cult. Do you think I'm stupid? Like, And she had a moment. She kind of stopped and she's like, wait, what? And we've had some conversations since then. And she's like, I guess it's not what I thought it was. And I'm like, it's not what you think it is.
No,
None
it
of these
isn't.
people are stupid. Cults are not recruiting stupid people because that's not going to help them get their message across. Like, if they want to use people and use their skills and use their money, they're not going to go after losers. I'm sorry. Like, they're not, they're going after people who are intelligent and smart and can contribute in some way. That's who they really want. And I think I'm glad I opened up to her in that, simply because hopefully it has helped change one more person's mind to see that, like, she's also vulnerable in her own way, in the same way as we said that we all are.
Yep.
And have a little bit more empathy for people who are trapped in
Yep. Yep. And it's a kind offer that you've made in terms of allowing people to contact you. If anybody would like Rachel's email address, you can reach out to me and I can connect the two of you together so that you can have that conversation. And I think what is really inspiring about our conversation today is not only have you been able to give us some insight into how doomsday prophecies affect the people that are living through them, that truly believe them, we get a little bit of insight into how people would have felt decades ago when previous doomsday prophecies from different groups came and went. Dates just went by and nothing changed. And I think that's really important to think about in terms of understanding why groups fracture and break off from one another and then just multiply and change and still exist in some form today. It allows us to really begin to understand how somebody could believe in somebody else's prediction for the end of the world and what life looks like when you're preparing for the world to end, not only in your mind but physically as well, in terms of shopping, in terms of looking after your pets. So that's been a really good part of this discussion today, as well as the education around who Harold Camping was and his legacy in terms of the group that exists in Family Radio's place. And I think the most incredible thing is the fact that 2 or 3 days later, after the 21st of October, you just said, okay, well, now let's get on with life then. And you're sitting here today with a master's, a PhD, a horse, which, people might equate to equine therapy, which I've heard can be very successful for
that.
some people.
Yeah.
And you're also, you're empathetic and compassionate. You're obviously very well educated around the subject of cults and coercion now, and you're able to just very intelligently have those conversations with other people who were much like I was before I started the podcast, just kind of like, oh, well, cults exist once every 10 years and they're made up of people who are just really gullible, which is, of course, not true in any sense of the word. So thank you so much for your time, Rachel, for just coming here and telling us about your experiences and just opening up to people about what was the most traumatic time in your life, how that impacted not only you but your family, your friends, people around you, and hundreds of people that you've never even met before. So I do appreciate you coming here today and offering us this information and giving us just a little bit more information to add to our toolkits in terms of arming ourselves against cults and coercive control. And I'm really excited to get a picture of your horse when you send it to me.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. Yeah, and yes, my horse has been great. I know, not a lot of people can afford a horse. They're expensive. My siblings have like guinea pigs and hamsters and dogs and cats. And I would say, like, to anybody who's like been in a cult, like, find a thing, fine. It can be Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I'm watching Bad Batch right now. Like, I'm, I really enjoy all of the lore around Star Wars. Like, find something you enjoy. Like, maybe get a pet if you can afford it and you have the time. Something that has nothing to do with the cult you were in. Like, give yourself some breathing room and space from that. And also, cults take away your individuality and the things that you like. So take some time to find what you do like and embrace that. And I also think, something that would have been really helpful when we were going through that, speak for myself, when I was going through that, is instead of somebody, I know people meant well, but instead of saying, oh, I'm glad you didn't commit suicide, maybe just say like, hey, I'm here for you. Do you need anything? And don't be questioning what this person believes, because they have already been given every kind of armor to push you away if you're going to question their beliefs. But like, practically, if somebody thinks the world's going to end and it doesn't, you're going to go day to day, but this person's life has been shattered. And if they feel too far away from the rest of the world, they're just going to cling to their beliefs even more into the next predicted date. So check in with them every so often. If you have like the, capacity to do so, and ask if they need something. Would they like to just, I don't know, go to a park with you or something? Be the connection to the outside world that just shows that you're thinking of them and that you aren't judging them, because like, I'll tell you, they're not that different from you. They just fell into something that's different. And it's not helpful if you judge them, but it is helpful if like with some of the day-to-day practical things, if you can just show that you care enough about them, that, somebody is there. Because they'll tell you it's really depressing to open up your cabinets and seeing next to nothing except like some saltines and like a little juice in the fridge, and you're still so into your beliefs that you can't possibly go shopping on a Sunday, so you have to wait another day. And all you're getting is a message that somebody's glad you haven't offed yourself. For like, that was one way that it was put to me. And then on the other hand, everybody who is talking to you is still in the group, so you're all trying to figure out what's going on, and that's really, isolating.
I think that's a really nice thing to end on, just to make sure that we're spreading that empathy around, and really just trying to support one another when somebody is going through something really tough. It doesn't have to be a doomsday prophecy. It can be anything. It can be the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a job. It can be any type of transitional period in a person's life that might result in them falling into one of these belief systems in the first place. So just being a little bit more empathetic is the big message to take away from this conversation, if it's not everything else that we've talked about as well. So thank you so much for your time, Rachel, and I really hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh, thank you so much, Casey. Thank you for listening to me. I know we went longer, but I just appreciate you taking the time and caring so much. And I hope that you have a really good evening.
Take care, Rachel. Bye.
Bye.
That is the end of this mini-series on Harold Camping and Family Radio. To support the show from as little as £1 a month, please consider visiting patreon.com/thecultvault. To get in touch with me, you can find me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter and Instagram @cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, host of the Cult Vault Podcast.